Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. We've had the presentation. The debate is currently going on. But can the 2023 budget be described as business-friendly? Has it got the required ingredients to help grow enterprises in this country? It has been described by some, or some have argued that the private sector is supposed to be the engine of growth. So going through this document, have you got the required ingredients that will grow private enterprises in this country? Well, that is what we're talking about on PM Express Business Edition today. As I engage the Chief Executive, the Association of Ghana Industries, Setchuma Kabwa, also Abeku Jen Kwanza, is a partner, PricewaterhouseCoopers, that is PwC Ghana. Mark Bedua Boaji's Chief Executive, the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Dr. Sam Ankra is president of the African Investment Group, an investment person on a business that actually in the space of import and export. What is their verdict on the budget when it comes to taxes? Is that going to sophisticate or actually affect businesses or grow them? All these issues wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition. Take a short break and we be right back. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the 2023 budget and whether it can be described as business-friendly and whether it has all the ingredients that would help enterprises in this country grow. Or I've said before that private sector is supposed to be the engine of growth. In a time where we're all talking about growth and expansion in these challenging times, can the private sector take the mantle? On PM Express Business Edition, we're talking about the 2023 budget and its impact on businesses in this country. I'll be joined by Setchuma Kabwa, he's Chief Executive of the Association of Ghana Industries, in studio with me here. And Abeku Jen Kwanza, he's a partner at PwC Ghana, an accounting and advisory firm with reputable institutions that they manage in Ghana and across the world as well. And also, that is Mark Bedua Boaji. He is Chief Executive the Ghana National Association of Chamber Commerce and Industries. He will join us via Zoom. And also that is Dr. Sam Ankra, is president of the African Investment Group. He's also a chief executive. He's into investment, commodity trading. And what does he say about the budget? Distinguished gentlemen, welcome to PM Express Business Edition. I'll do the businesses first and I'll come to the tax partner, because for some of the businesses out there, they are telling me that, George, it's all about taxes, and nothing else. So we'll be doing more of the taxes than the normal talk. But let me first do a quick round with my businessmen here. Mr. Chuma Kabwa, AGI. Just a quick round talk on the 2023 budget. I mean, for you, what are your preliminary comments on the budget?
Well, thank you very much, George. I think there is a general recognition that we have a serious challenge on hand in our economy, and that is recognized in the budget. We have instability in our macroeconomic environment, so you could see efforts on the part of government to bring stability. And the way to bring stability is to increase your revenue mobilization and also cut down expenditure so that you can have a good balancing act here. And in doing so, some measures have been taken. There's a general consensus that at this particular situation where we find ourselves, we should actually boost production to increase local production and reduce imports. Part of the reason why we've had these challenges is that we've had excessive importation, and that is always putting pressure on our city. And we see some effort on the part of government to try and deal with this. However, in doing so, government has also come up with some tax measures, and as you said, those are issues we can go a bit more deep into it as we go along. But generally speaking, the intention is clear. We want to support the productive sector, but how to do it is always the challenge. The implementation of effective systems to improve the productive sector is always the challenge. And the tax systems that are coming up, some of them run counter to that whole agenda of promoting the productive sector. So that would be my preliminary comment.
I like the bit about supporting growth in industry, because that is an area where, for you and your members out there in these times, we'll be so particular about. I was talking to someone who is in the industry, import business, and also other related as well. And he told me one thing that got me shocked, because I didn't know first. He said, George, even in COVID, our numbers were stellar. But with the uncertainty now, things are bad. And for him, his challenge is with the uncertainty than the fact that you can't plan because you don't know what is happening. Mark Bedua Boaji is Chief Executive of the Ghana National Industries. That is, Mark, preliminary comment on the budget. I mean, exciting, interesting, challenging, or the uncertainty is getting worse and worse? Mark, if you can unmute, I'll be so grateful.
Yeah, is it better now?
Yes, better, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll prefer using the word challenging and uncertainties, looking at the situation we have at the moment. I'm of the opinion that even the theme for the budget should be increasing revenue at the expense of business growth instead of what they give us, because it's more aggressive in revenue generation. In doing that, you see a number of policies that, if you're not careful, will cripple the activities of businesses. And if you look at the budget itself, it's as if they are not expecting a very massive economic activity or growth in 2023. Looking at the projected growth, and if you look at even the various sectors, you realize that you see a reduction in the growth in even the services sector and the agri sector, with the exception of the industry sector. So generally, you could see that the objective is for now to raise revenue to solve the fiscal challenges that we are having. But we should be careful how we do that. In the end, we are collapsing businesses, and the purpose for which they want to achieve within this budget may not be achieved. So I see it not too friendly for businesses from where I sit, looking at the taxes here and there, and other policies that were supposed to even to stimulate private sector activity are also not too clear. If you look at the 7-point agenda, the two key items of boosting private sector capacity and also enhancing exports, the policies are also not too clear, and for me, it's too vague for us. So the budget, we are not happy about, because prior to that, we sent our inputs, and we were expecting that at least there would not be no taxes, new ones, and also an increment in existing ones. So for them to come out with this increasing taxes, it's just unfortunate that these things are happening. It is not good for businesses anyway.
We're beginning to see whether we've been able to get through the line to reach Dr. Saman Christ, President of the African Investment Group. But Sir Chimakoba, let me let you put on your economist hat, because you are an economist and not speaking as CEO of Association of Ghana Industries. Wasn't it unexpected, a budget that we're expecting some austere measures and a budget that was grappling with debt overhang? That approach of trying to cut down expenditure and raise more revenue would have been the approach, whatever expense it has to do that, putting on your economist hat.
Yes, so you're right. In a situation like this, your objective is to be able to stabilize the macroeconomic environment so that people can predict and plan and all that. And in doing so, as I said, you need to raise revenue. In raising revenue, you need to really look at your revenue handles, the tax handles that will bring you the revenue. But at the same time, you are looking at employment creation. You're also looking at the long term. And you're also asking yourself, why are we here? And part of the reason why we are here is because we are not producing enough to feed our system. We are importing so much. And therefore, if you want to generate revenue and you sacrifice the productive sector to raise the revenue, in the long term, it's not going to help you. So I think this is the balancing act we have to do, and we have to do properly. So the fact that you want to raise revenue does not mean you should lose sight of the productive sector that you want to support. So typically, you've increased tax rates, the VAT rate by 2.5%, but the way it is done is a bit more burden on the part of the productive sector, which you are trying to support. So that runs counter to whatever you want to do. If you look at it, for example, the fact that most of the well-organized companies, if you take the manufacturing sector, they are all well-organized, so they pay the VAT, the standard rate, and then all that goes with it. But the importers, most of them pay flat rate. The flat rate hasn't changed. And Abeku, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The flat rate hasn't changed. It has remained the same, and yet you've increased the VAT. So it means that those in the organized sector who are paying the VAT, there's more burden on them, whilst you are actually leaving the importers out. So you are actually supporting importation rather than the productive sector. So you have to be very careful if you are introducing new taxes, how you handle it so that it helps you to achieve the very objective that you're setting for yourself.
Let me come to Abegu Kwansa. He's a tax partner at PwC. And for many businesses out there, for a lot of people out there, when the budget was read, the major takeaway was VAT has gone up, e-levy. But there is more to it when it comes to those tax measures and how it impacts me as an individual, and even businesses as well. Can you just run us through to some of these major tax measures in the budget, and before we even look at how impact businesses going forward in 2023?
All right, so thank you very much, George. And let me begin by creating some good news out there. Reason being that the conversation around the budget has been a lot of taxes going out, a lot of things happening. But I would like to start from aspects where government sort of providing some relief. And then I would land on things like VAT, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So to begin, during the course of the year, you did hear the conversation around benchmark discount policy, which then became a conversation between those in industry, those who produce, those who manufacture, against those in our markets who typically buy and sell. Those in the productive sector argued for the scrapping of that benchmark discount policy. And I would want to emphasize the word discount. Discount meaning that any base on which the custom taxes were being computed was going to be lower than what it should ordinarily have been. Government is saying to respond to the cry of producers, manufacturers, I would heed your call and take away those discounts. That should enable you to be a lot more competitive, because, George, what actually happens is that when you import raw materials, there are certain concessions available to you, which will not be available to you when you buy finished products to come in and sell. So this is good news for those who produce vis-a-vis those who just buy and sell. The other thing, George, is that if we are in a challenging environment, the expectation is that when you do business, you may make a loss. What the budget said regarding that is that I'm going to unitize the various losses that I have. What this essentially means, George, is that currently in Ghana, you could carry forward losses for 3 years or up to 3 years, or you could carry forward losses for up to 5 years. By unitization, my expectation would be that government is going to allow all businesses to at least carry forward losses for up to 5 years. And that should give some form of relief to those who are actually making losses. Having addressed this issue, I would then land on the issue around VAT. So the first measure that we all heard was that VAT was going to go up from the standard VAT rate of 12.5 to 15%. And I use the word standard.
And try and let's move away from the accounting jargon.
All right.
And break it down for us.
Yes. So government says, I'm going to move from the standard VAT rate from 12.5 to 15. The word standard means that this is what we usually expect. So when I go and buy something and that thing requires VAT to be paid, then unless there's an exception, I am going to charge VAT from next year at 15% rather than charging VAT at 12.5%. There are exceptions. What are these exceptions? I could go and buy things and pay VAT, as CEO said, at the flat rate of 3%. So whilst one is standard, one is flat rate. For you to operate the flat rate VAT, the law requires that your taxable supplies should be between 200,000 and 500,000 Ghana cedis. My only challenge with the recent amendment, which was done somewhere this year, or came into effect this year, was that our parliamentarians gave the Commissioner General some discretion as to determine whether when you fall within that band, you should still go ahead and charge a flat rate or you shouldn't charge a flat rate. Sometimes we do say that do not allow crisis to just pass without you doing certain things with that crisis. Our recommendation regarding this VAT, as we currently speak, is not for government to withdraw based on the fact that people are making a call that the 2.5 is high, but rather we are saying that government review the VAT scheme. Let me explain, George. Based on the Ghana Revenue Authority's view, and I wish to emphasize the Ghana Revenue Authority's view on how VAT and the associated levy should be computed, is that when I go and buy something, there are 3 associated levies to the standard rate VAT. And these are what you call the NHIL, which I choose to call the health levy.
Yeah.
What you call the education levy, people call it Get Fund. And then the fact that we're in a COVID era and we need to recover. So the COVID-19 health recovery levy. So you have 2.5, 2.5, and 1. That gives you a total of 6. According to the GRA, if I am transacting and I need to charge these levies with VAT, I need to add the 6 to the base before adding the VAT. So let me give you an example. Assuming my phone goes for 100 cedis base, I add 6 to it, I get 106. I then apply the VAT to it, and then I get 119.25. George, that effectively means that on a product which would ordinarily sell for 100, because I am bringing in the VAT, I am now paying 19.25 effective tax.
So, I mean, really, what this VAT will do is that the cost of goods and services are going to shoot up.
Very good.
Is it by that 2.5 margin, or it will depend?
It will depend, George.
Okay.
It will depend on so many things. So let me just break.
But also, just to catch you a little bit, and from the layman's distance, we got the understanding about VAT being a consumption tax. It appears from your explanation, it's not only a consumption tax.
That's correct.
Help me out on that one.
All right. So, George, we just landed where we said if you start from 100, you get 119.25. So I'm saying that the effective taxes in there is 19.25, George. What government says is that I'm going to bring an extra 2.5. What that means is if I follow the way GRA does their computation, the VAT plus the levies will now give you a total of 21.9. Now, George, coming back to your question around prices will shoot up. Ordinarily, the answer is yes. But let's not forget that, George, when I get onto the negotiating table, my ability to push prices to the consumer depends on who is more powerful on that table. If you decide to mount all the increase in price on the consumer, the situation that you have is that the consumer may shift from your product to
But if it's a product that consumer cannot do with that, and I'll come back to search on that.
Okay.
Where one time I was saying that sometimes it's not just about passing these goods to
Correct.
and so if that good is inelastic.
Correct.
Maybe, but even today, I had some of the OMCs telling me that, George, consumption has dropped for the 4th quarter. So now they are forcing to drop the prices because there's a relation where when the prices are low, people consume more and it can make up for their margins and profits.
So, George, that's what I just said now. It depends on who is more powerful. So, for example, those who deal with the OMCs are now saying that I'm more powerful. I'm not going to drive. I'm going to probably pick a taxi
and it's a
or
fact.
join.
The consumption has dropped at 4th quarter.
All right. So, or join the Uber or whatever. So, what they are currently seeing is that your ability to just move the increment to the consumer is a bit restricted. What that therefore means is that government will still expect from January, if Parliament passes the law in its current form, the extra 2.5 adding up to 21.9%. So if I'm not able to transfer that, it means that my profit margin will drop. So even to government, if producers, manufacturers, those who sell, are not able to move the entire 21.9 to the consumer, that it means corporate taxes may drop. So George, let me quickly make some recommendations on this, and then we can continue the conversation. Our view has always been, and speaking to some of my clients who are members of AGI,
PwC,
amongst
Ghana,
others,
yeah.
are that we recognize that there is a need to raise more revenue. But the current system that we have is not effective enough. What we are recommending government to do is that, one, as part of this budget, government talked about the PCPEG, the post-COVID-19 recovery program. So if we're going to be in a post-COVID-19 recovery program, then what are we still doing with the COVID-19 levy?
Yeah.
So our view first is take away that levy, so it drops off. So you have the health, you have the education, and this proposed 2.5. Consolidate all of this to the VAT. That then gives you a total standard rate of 20% against 21.9 that I just talked about. And then allow businesses to take their full recovery of the 20%. What that does for you, George, is that you avoid a scenario or a situation whereby people get unnecessarily aggressive just because they cannot deal with a 21 point.
Has the learnings of e-levy showed us, and I know in this we talk about it in accounting class, where the tax evasion and tax avoidance shown us a lesson that the businessman, the consumer is becoming more sophisticated, that they know how to weave their way around the issue, the taxes, and government will not get what they are looking for.
Agreed. They have.
And you talked about the fact that corporate taxes could be going down because of how this is structured, right?
Correct. So as I just said, George, people would definitely do things to survive. So if you introduce a measure that does not work, so let me give an example just for the sake of our audience. Let's assume that CEO asks me to develop a certain platform to allow him to sell his products. What then happens, George, in this particular instance, is that if I'm not careful, just by picking up his product and then developing a platform to enable us to sell that product, I may incur these levies of 6% in here, 6% out there. If I could recover my taxes in terms of these levies, those would not have been a concern as far as my business arrangements are concerned. So even the 6% that we have complained several times about is actually not making people to take very effective decisions. And our call would be that government, please allow us to go back to the pre-August 2018 position where we could recover the entire VAT.
I'll be coming back to you in the other tax measures, and let me come back to Mr. Chuma as well. And for you as industries, do you see that as a big challenge? Because I remember a minister was trying to explain to me or make some argument about it. You can recover these VAT. So this argument about things will go up and all the rest. Do you see these taxes as a major hurdle for industries in these times when you are trying to pick up?
Yes, it is. It is indeed a big challenge. It's a challenge in the sense that it adds to your cost. At the end of the day, when you are selling the product in the market, the consumer is looking at the final price he's paying for your product. VAT, in principle, the incidence of the tax is not on you, the producer. It's supposed to be on the consumer.
Consumption tax.
So it's a consumption tax.
Okay.
So you are collecting it on behalf of government. Now, if you have a percentage of it, which is 6%, which you cannot recover, it means that that incidence is actually on you, the producer. So that's an additional levy on you. That's the first part. The second part is that once the price of the product is going up, the consumer has a choice. The choice he has is that, and also bear in mind that we also have a very large informal sector. The informal sector, they don't go by these arrangements. The flat rate is there for them to, as an option. So, and in the same market, we have people who are selling based on the flat rate, and then people selling on the standard rate and all the other issues. So in the same market, the same similar products, competing products, definitely the one that is paying the flat rate will have a cheaper cost, a cheaper price at the end of the day. When the consumer goes to the market, you buy the cheaper one. So we're actually encouraging informality. Yeah. The more formal you become, the higher the tax burden on you. Meanwhile, it is the formal sector that pays a lot more of the taxes. And even in this budget, I remember the analysis Abeku made yesterday, the tax contribution from the formal sector is way, way higher than the informal sector. Meanwhile, we are trying to encourage people to go to the formal sector. If you do so, people will go to the informal sector. And the other fact, though, is that it's not everyone that can go informal. Relatively bigger companies, they have no choice. So the effect will be that they will either reduce their production volumes because their market is shrinking, and when they downsize, in implications on employment, tax payment to government, and so on and so forth. So it's not in the interest of either the government or the producers or consumers to have very high tax rates. You need to calculate it very well, so have a good balance so that you can...
Do you see that as an option where some businesses and your members may have to scale down to stay in business in order to, because the tax burden is quite heavy on them?
No, these are survivor issues.
And that is the option, right?
That is the option. And that's why I go with the proposal Abeku has made. And this proposal, we've made it several times, even before the current budget came in, that why don't you just make it, allow the companies to fully recover their VAT. VAT used to be 17.5, okay, increased to 18.5. if you pay that up for government, you must recover everything, so that there's no levy at all. Then we all come to the same level. But where you have a certain levy on it and I cannot recover, it becomes an additional tax burden on me. And the incident then passes on from the consumer to me, the producer. So if we arrange it properly, I think we can streamline this. Government will still earn the same revenue because you are talking of the same percentage. So if you increase to 20%, as he's saying, and you allow me to recover, then the incidents come on the consumer. In that sense, even though prices will go up, it balances the system. Informality wouldn't come in, and then everybody...
I'll come to you before I come to... I'll go to Mr. that is Bedu there to get some perspective there, but I'll come back to you to help me out with not getting so much details on some of those best practices elsewhere about sometimes when the rates are low, we end up collecting more in revenue when they're having a high taxes. And my Bedu Abuaje, I remember Ali Nacha was speaking at a program and he made a comment that he's worried that often we do things like somebody getting married before going for marriage counseling. And so does it expose again the level of consultation before some of these things are done? Because I remember yesterday I was at a program with Dr. Ishmael Yamson and he raised concerns about how business associations are not moving too much forward to put pressure on government with some of these engagements to ensure that policies favor industries, policies favor businesses. Now, the budget is done, and we are here trying to push for certain things to be done.
Well, there's one thing engaging and another thing for duty bearers to take whatever we put forward for them to adopt. In fact, over the years, there have been several instances where we've had opportunity to present our input into the budget, and we have engaged the finance ministry on a number of issues. I remember the last time I did a presentation on behalf of the chamber, they made it clear that there are some of them that they cannot do immediately. There are some that they defer to a certain period that they will implement. But there are some that for us is very urgent that you cannot defer to a later date because the effect on businesses will not be palatable for all of us. So, for instance, the VAT issue, for me, at this time that businesses are going through difficult situation, the last thing that any manager of economy would do is to increase the VAT or increase the rate of a tax. Just look at all the things with the depreciation, with the inflation and fuel prices and other things, they all feed into the cost of doing business. The structure of the VAT, as has been said by Mr. Kwanzaa and said, is not actually in the interest of businesses, and it's counterproductive. The fact that businesses are denied an opportunity to recover the VAT means that a chunk of it, the 6%, is going to directly to affect cost of production. And I think we should be careful when we are discussing all this and look at it as a country, but look at it as a continent where we have moved from being a single market to an African-wide market where others also have access to our market.
Yeah.
AFCFTA. We should look at how competitive businesses are and also look at around us what the other countries are doing. The VAT within the other countries are lower than what we are doing. 21.9. For me, it is difficult for any business to operate under this VAT system. It affects your cost and it affects your revenue as well. Because the people that are coming to buy the product, if the prices should go up, if there are other alternatives, they will prefer even not to buy at all. And your revenue will go down. And your bottom line will definitely go down. So if the government really want to grow the economy, stimulate private sector development, and also ensure that businesses expand to be able to absorb the teeming unemployed youth, then this is not the right time for them to increase tax or introduce new taxes. The government is clearly saying that it's not going to employ anybody for 2023. So the only hope for those who are looking for jobs is within the private sector. And if you are burdening the private sector with taxes and they cannot expand, they are not making profit, then what we are saying is that in 2023, the unemployment rate is going to go up.
Mr. Mark, let me come back quickly before you go ahead with your point as well. What are your members saying? Are you in the States to take on fresh graduates?
No, at the moment, it's a survival issue.
But can
So
you
if you're
accommodate?
ready-
The government is closing the door to fresh employment. Obviously, people are going
that
to
is
come
why
to
I'm
your
saying
members.
that for businesses, the first reason why anybody will set up a business is not to employ anybody. The first reason is to make sure that they create value and wealth for their shareholders. The employment bit comes in when they expand. So if I'm not expanding, if taxes are killing me, crippling my activities, then I will not add on cost by just employing people. Those who are coming are supposed to provide value for me. So if the taxes are such that my cost of production is coming up and not making profit, then there is no, even those who are in, as I said the last time, people are laying off, people are downsizing. So why would you downsize and go and pick somebody when the person does not even have an experience at the moment? So it is a very, for me, every macroeconomic policy has a trade-off. And it's about how we are able to find a balance, very good balance between the trade-off. If you want to increase revenue through taxation, the trade-off is that the likelihood that it will affect businesses is there, and that is what we are facing now. We are increasing revenue, but we are crippling the activities of businesses. I think we've not been able to actually define and manage the trade-off very well, and it's not going to be good for us in 2023. So businesses definitely, for me, we are going to suffer within 2023 if they are not listening to us. In fact, the e-levy should have been a lesson to the Ministry of Finance, that the people that you think that they are not tax experts, they are actually tax experts. If you increase tax to a certain level, they will find a way to avoid the payment of the tax. That is why under the e-levy, you could not actually get the revenue, even 10% of the revenue that we were expecting. If you are not careful, this revenue that we are expecting from this part, we may not be able to achieve it. And it's going to throw all the target that we have set for 2023 out of the year. Personally, I have doubt whether we'll be able to achieve the target, because looking at the target, I don't think we'll be able to achieve them with the kind of measures, with the kind of attitude that the Ministry of Finance is putting up. Deciding not to listen to businesses, I don't think is the right way to go.
I'll be coming to you to see whether the door is closed. I mean, there's still some engagement going on before the appropriation is done, and even the regulations are laid before Parliament. So maybe there's still a grace period. But Mr. Akopo, I mean, government is saying that they can't employ your other members, industries. Can I bring my brother or my son there as well next year to employ? Or it looks quite challenging.
Very challenging, and this is the kind of call that comes on me every day. People think that once you are a manager or organizer of businesses, you have access to all kinds of employment. But really, these are difficult times because you talk to the companies and you see how they are bleeding, and then you're asking that they should employ somebody. It becomes a challenge. So
you see us coming from space.
Yes.
That you don't live in Ghana.
You don't understand what is going on.
Yeah.
So it's really a difficult time for most businesses, and therefore expecting that we are expanding to be employing, I think we need to look at it critically. I know in the budget, government has made a very clear statement as part of the 7-point agenda that they're going to boost production, which for me is a laudable thing. And then also and in doing so, they're going to support the production of certain strategic products so that we reduce the importation of those products. By producing those products, you're actually going to expand and employ more people. We will have to put in proper measures and talk to industry so that we get the right interventions and be able to expand. By so doing, we'll be able to, and if we develop the value chains very well for some of those products that they've listed and some of the products that we are recommending, I think that we should be able to expand. I mean, we shouldn't give up hope. There's still possibilities. It all depends on how we strategize. Whenever there's a challenge, it also brings opportunities. I remember COVID time when we thought everything was going so bad. Suddenly we got companies that were producing sanitizers and all that. That became another kind of business which we were not that much used to. And they were employing people. So in this situation where we have all recognized that the way to go is to reduce importation. And now if you bring in any measure, you have the generality of the population supporting you. And this is the time we should take that strong position and say, we are going industrialization. So let's support industries. And if we do so, industry is always linked to agriculture. And you know, they've also made very good points in agriculture development. If you link agri to industry properly, and we develop the value chains well, we can create the jobs. The jobs can be created locally. And instead of over importation, if we do all this work, I'm sure the jobs can be created. It's not too bad. We just have to work at it and make sure we get the policies right.
PwC is not just about strictly accounting advice. I know when you have your strength in human capital as well. And for some people, the worry is about this challenge and the fact that we are losing very good human capital. And it is not just the doctors or the nurses. I know 2 personal friends who are accountants who are now in UK. Yeah. They took their wife, their kids, they're in school. The wife is a nurse. He's working with a different accounting firm in UK. And they are coming for these hands like crazy. Yeah. Yeah. What should, because government is saying they can't employ, private sector is struggling. So these human capital, we losing it too. Yeah. And it's terrible. I mean, I know a friend who tells me that every day he has an agency outside dropping him an email, telling him about an opportunity outside. They will sponsor him the visa and everything. What should be the way out in dealing with some of these challenges in not losing the human capital in the midst of, because businesses need this human capital to grow.
All right. So, George, thanks for the question, but I'm going to tie it back to taxes at the end of the day. Ultimately, as one of your those you're interviewing said, people go into businesses typically to make profits. Yeah. That's the starting point. And then there are so many things that come up as a result of doing that. One of which would be expanding and employing a lot of people. If, as a result of our tax regimes, businesses do not grow as they are expected to grow, then people would obviously look for opportunities elsewhere. I mean, you've all heard about what is called the Great Resignation, meaning that those, even in the West, are leaving their jobs to others. So it is not surprising that accountants are leaving, doctors are leaving, even some lawyers are even leaving to other jurisdictions. So as a government, our proposal would be, can we make the environment a lot more hopeful?
How do we do that?
Encouraging.
A government that is struggling, raising revenue, a government that has gotten itself into a deep debt hole. Some would say due to their own, how they manage the economy and all the rest. How do we get around? Because some would say it's a chicken and egg issue. In one breath, yes, you will question government and hang government for too much taxes, but some also say we can't tax ourselves out of this challenge. Yeah. How do we get around that?
Well, George, I believe it's about communication, if I put it that way. It's about conveying your plans to society. It's about engaging. So, for example, one of the things that government announced in this budget was that for everyone that operates and charges a 1% income tax rate over their tax holiday, those rates are going to go up to 5%. The question is, if we have our youths looking at going into agriculture, for example, with the hope that they were going to pay a 1% income tax rate, and now you're going to pick it up to 5%, would that give them reason to stay or reason to leave? So I was happy Mr. Waju was talking about the fact that hopefully the door will not be closed entirely. You said the door will not be closed entirely. So hopefully government will be prepared to have a conversation around some of these policies. The minister himself, after presenting it, said it's an income budget. And my expectation would be that if it's an income budget and there are certain feedback that are arising from the budget that you have presented to our representatives, then all this conversation that we are having will be considered in drafting the bills and going to Parliament for the bills to be approved. So in brief, I would encourage government to listen and to the extent possible, take this feedback to send a signal of hope to those who are living, not to live any longer.
But reality check that Mr. Bekwan said that, what is the way forward on the VAT issue? Because for businesses, so let me do some scenarios here. Let's say government is not going to listen, and we saw with e-levy. What is the way going forward for businesses in dealing with this VAT issue? Do we look at the input expense or whatever, the relief that brings, or what? Because the reality is that there's a limit of what you can pass to consumers and what you can absorb. And also the fact that you are competing with other businesses, your suppliers outside, credit and all the rest. How do you get around this VAT going forward in terms of advising businesses?
All right, so maybe my advice to businesses first is that much as businesses may not be favoring just a 2.5 increase, George, I talked about the fact that there are also other concessions in the law. So for example, does a manufacturer who is a member of AGI aware that you can actually bring in items into Ghana, specifically raw materials into Ghana without paying VAT? Are they actually aware of that? Are they aware that you could actually bring in certain things if you go through the appropriate customs processes and get your items brought in at zero custom duties or even at a 5% rate? Are they actually aware that you can bring in things and even suspend the time that you pay your duties by putting them in warehouses, etc.? So my recommendation are that even though this VAT increase may be a challenge, there are so many opportunities that you can pick up in the tax law if you are aware of some of these things and navigate it. So in brief, please permit me to summarize. If you're a manufacturer and you belong to the AGI, you can actually get in raw materials without paying VAT if you go through the right procedures. You can actually delay the time that you pay your custom duties and import taxes if you suspend the time that you pay, amongst others. So these are some two quick points that I would actually share.
I want you to come.
Just a small support and correction. The issue concerning the VAT not being paid on raw material is actually VAT deferment.
Yes.
So you eventually pay, but then you pay it after production. We call it post-production tax.
Okay.
So the idea is not to avoid completely.
No, it's not.
So you still pay, but then you go through a process. So that possibility is there, but you still pay. But that's also a very important aspect of this discussion. Now, if you want to support the productive sector, you need to really look at your tax regime. We have what we call the pre-production tax and post-production tax. For manufacturers, concentrate more on the post-production. Because when you do pre-production, it adds so much to their cost that eventually they have to pass it on to their consumers in the form of higher price and makes them uncompetitive. So sometimes you can use strategies and you shift the tax to a certain level or a certain stage where government even gets more. And I'll give you an example. About 3 years ago, we fought for a particular regime, what we call the zero VAT for the textile companies. The textile companies were bleeding because whatever product they bring to the market, others, copy it, the designs, and then come into the market. And they were smuggling them in. When they smuggle them in, they don't pay VAT, they don't pay all the duties that goes with it. So therefore, the local companies were becoming uncompetitive. So we asked government, you know what? Let these textile companies also don't pay the VAT. Let them, they shouldn't pay VAT so that their prices will be competitive as those that are coming in. When we did that, 3 years down the line, we did analysis. These same companies who were then making losses and were downsizing and were going out of business started bouncing back because we created an opportunity for them to have the same level of playing field and then started competing very head-on with the imported ones who were being smuggled in. So they started gaining market share. Eventually, their corporate tax went up. And one of them, the corporate tax they paid last year was way higher than the VAT they would have paid. So government eventually has gotten the money revenue through the corporate tax. So you have shifted the tax from pre-production to post-production. And in the end, you have also sustained the business and you are keeping employment. So these are ways of handling taxes such that depending on where you place it, you have different impacts. And it's very important that we look at it from this. And let me also add a bit about the benchmark values. Because it's our pet. It's something we advocate very strongly. So we commend government for taking that final decision that this has to be reversed. And we thought it is very important. And I think that sometimes people think we are asking for too much, but we are not asking for too much. The principle is that you want to support the productive sector. In most jurisdictions, if you are importing raw materials, which you don't have locally, why should you pay tax on the raw material that you are now going to process and then sell and pay the tax after? But here in Ghana, you pay tax when you're paying duties on raw materials, even though it's lower than the finished product. So we need to look at all this. So whilst we are encouraged, we support government's reversal of the benchmark values to the previous status, we need to look at the issue of the raw material importation to encourage local producers.
So, because I'll be coming back to you to look at other tax measures and even with the VAT, and then let's look at other policies as well relating to tax and how it impacts on businesses. And also, Ms. Magbedu-Abuaji, I want to also be coming back to you to also get your thought whether you think that the door is closed in terms of VAT, or there is still an opportunity to push before the appropriation or that the regulations are laid before Parliament. This is PM Express Business Edition. We're going for a short break and we'll be right back as we talk about the 2023 budget and its impact on businesses. Well, it looks like we are a business-friendly station. Our programs director decided to allow us to extend this program to 10:30 to get more understanding in terms of what the budget means and its impact on businesses. This is PM Express Business Edition. We'll be right back. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the 2023 budget and its impact on businesses. I'm engaging the Chief Executive of the Ghana Association of Industries, Chuma Kwabua. That is also Abeku Kwansa. He's a tax partner at PwC, and Magbedu-Abuaji. He is with the Ghana National Association of Industries and Commerce out there. And also we'll be joined by, that is Dr. Sam Ankra. He is the president, that is African Investment Group as well. We're talking about that. It appears that is the biggest elephant in the room now, but also what are the other tax measures in the budget and how it will impact on you. And also we'll stretch it to look at the broader policy measures as well. The IMF program, what would that mean for businesses going forward? Will they bring that much stability for us? Oh, no, let me get to Mark Bedu-Abuaji. And Mark, do you think that the door is closed? I mean, for the concerns that you have with the VAT, they're still yet to get the appropriation passed. They're struggling to get all the members in the House to debate the budget. Mark, for you think the door is closed, or you think...
No, not at all. I think Honorable John Kumar clearly indicated that they are listening government. It is for that reason why they also reduced the e-levy from 1.75 to 1.5 and now 1%. If you would have preferred that it go lower than the 1%. So I think they are listening to us. Our concern should be their concern. We are not here to bastardize the budget and make it look as if there's nothing in it, but we are here to share our concerns so they can factor these concerns into their decision making. I mean, the MPP government clearly indicated that they want to move from taxation to production. So if there are taxes that is not helping business, and they make out to businesses, and we are making it aware to them, I think they should take it in good faith. We are ready to engage them as well, so that we can have a broader discussion on how they can generate revenue and also stimulate private sector activity as well. So I don't think that the door is closed. I think probably at the end of the day, we are likely to probably hear either a total removal of the 2.5, or, I mean, bringing it down to a level where all of us will be comfortable, so that we can also contribute towards bringing this nation out of the challenges that we are going through.
Do you see the VAT as the biggest elephant in the room here?
Yeah, for me, from where I sit, I think is the biggest elephant, as you are saying. The NPP is an elephant, so maybe they are getting bigger so that they can all feel comfortable. I mean, it's a concern across board. Everybody is talking about it. Even though there are other things, people have raised concern about the e-levy, the fact that they have removed the minimum threshold and it's not good for the so-called vulnerable. Even within businesses, there are those that actually send this less than 100 cedis regularly. So if you are charging them the number of times they are sending less than 100 cedis, cumulatively, it's a cost to them. So I was even expecting that once they reduce it, they can even increase the threshold. But for them to take it out completely, I don't think is the best. So let's all of us work together. I think there is hope. We can change things. We can turn things around and ensure that the economy move forward in the right direction.
Mr. Abeku and Councillor, do you think that there is room for negotiation on this VAT thing, or it's a no-no? I mean, looking at judging from past experiences, you know, and trying to, and also, and I'll come to all of you, that we shouldn't forget that this budget is supposed to be a fund, an IMF budget, and the country we find ourselves, they will push for some tax measures to deal with the revenue issue and expenditure thing. Do you think that government can negotiate on this VAT issue, or it will be difficult? In one breath, you might give your professional advice, but the reality also, can anything be done on this VAT thing?
George, I would say yes. A lot of things can be done on the VAT thing. I don't think we are actually achieving what we should be achieving from our VAT. And I would like to refer you to a report that was published by the Finance Ministry itself. An interesting thing in that report, which is a survey on Ghana's tax system, is that from 2018 thereabouts up to 2020, you would notice that when we started introducing this delinking, denying levies, the VAT to GDP
What are those
ratio,
things? Just help me out here. Those denying levies you're talking about?
Yes, those levies.
Yeah.
So the levies are the health and then the education levy, or what people call NHIL, and the GET fund. Ever since we did that, the VAT to GDP ratio from 2018 have been dropping. And what that actually tells you is that even though we thought that it would give us more money, it is not giving us more money. Let me give you an example. Guta wrote a letter, publicly, a public letter, to the fact that they would not comply with a change in the VAT law.
Wow.
And some of the reasons that they gave was that you walk into their markets and there are about 3 different regimes operating in there. Some people are being made to charge 19.5, so 19.25. Others are made to charge 3% plus the COVID levy of 1%, whilst others are not charging at all. And for me, when I listen to them, all that they are trying to tell you is that reform your VAT system. So if we get a VAT system that works, and I believe that government would listen and make the VAT system work, I haven't seen any real support for the whole idea of keeping the levies in the form in which the levies are being kept. Remember, George, the case we are making is not a case for government not to do anything at all. We are saying you can do some adjustments up to even 20%, and that would actually make us one of the highest countries in Africa, with the likes of Morocco and Madagascar at 20%. Some are 19.25, like Cameroon, and others are actually low. So in our view, we believe that government will listen, reform the VAT system because it's quite inefficient. It is causing people to take decisions that they should not be taking, and we can actually raise a lot more revenue. I believe the IMF itself probably would have taken a look at our VAT system and actually asked probably government to look at it because it is currently not working as it ought to work.
And you're a tax person. What happens to, I mean, the analytics, the data gathering? Because I was told use e-levy as an example because it's fresh in our minds. That what is the tax advisory division of the Ministry of Finance doing with GRA to do the necessary assessment, extrapolations, look at the performance of businesses? You told me right now about the VAT GDP dropping. It means that there's a problem, that hiking the rate is not the answer. Yeah. Reviewing maybe how the collections are done, expanding the scope, pre-budget engagement, and outside the Ali Nache's example about doing wedding before going for marriage counseling. What is happening?
George, I believe probably the proponents of the levies, you know how the levies work. The levies basically work without allowing you a deduction. So they will see the money coming in without giving the money out. But the issue is that the businessman who is being denied an ability to take care of his costs will probably look for other ways to deal with this. George, permit me to quickly jump from these levies to something connected, which also came into the budget. So somewhere in September, a new law entered into force. And you might have probably heard all this conversation around the EVAT.
Yeah.
All that the EVAT is seeking to do is to say that I am going to replace the Commissioner General's manual invoice. When you go and buy, and somebody writes out an invoice for you, that invoice would be replaced by an electronic system where GRA hooks its network into your network. So that as soon as you want to raise an invoice, they have a signal of it, they get a backup copy, and that would ensure that the under declaration for VAT would be minimized. All right? So, George, I believe that with GRA doing some of these things, even the need to have the levies in its current form would no longer be necessary. And for the sake of businesses, they need to know that the law provides a 1-year period to complete this process. In other words, since the law came into force in September, or GRA started effective implementation in October, one can argue that by the end of September 2023, all businesses should have hooked onto the system. But the same law does provide a 3-month extension period, where if I believe that I cannot comply, I can apply to the GRA for a 3-month period. So you hear GRA probably saying that by 2024, they expect to migrate everybody to the EVAT system. So I think the EVAT system would be a way for government to raise additional revenue. And for me, I also believe that there are so many advantages even to businesses. So for example, if you operate a shop and you're not there yourself, and you have an EVAT system, and you ensure that your attendees are actually using that system to raise invoices, then George, the likelihood of people selling and not accounting to you will be minimized. And these are also some things that businesses should know and actually prepare for.
Mr. Chimukawa, I mean, I just want to also, before I get a wrap on this, but let's look at other tax revenue measures as well. That how bad is your situation as we speak right now when it comes to industries? Because we've had a lot of things, and whether the current state was considered in developing these tax measures, because a chunk of these taxes will be coming from industries.
You know, we appreciate one thing. We appreciate the fact that we are entering into agreement with IMF, and part of the conditionalities is to mobilize domestic revenue. And now
you can't borrow, it's shut. I mean, so downgrading for the next 4 years, we can't go to the international market.
So some effort to mobilize revenue through these tax systems was inevitable. So somehow it was expected. However, it's the structure of it that is important. You can. I think in all these discussions, the point we are making is that we are not saying businesses shouldn't pay taxes. We are saying that structure it in a way that becomes more friendly and friendlier to those that you want to support even more. And that is the productive sector, the industry sector. And that's the point we are making. So, and then the other aspect relating to taxes is the compliance level. When you have a situation where others comply much more than others, then you don't create a level playing field. And those who are able to maneuver, they always have an advantage over those who are unable to do so. Because we live in a system where there's high informal sector, the organized sectors where you can police them. And in some of the breweries and some of these big companies, you actually have a GRA person sitting there 24 hours, monitoring every product that comes out.
We saw that recently in the shops, and I thought we were being harassed, you know.
Well,
I thought that's my personal insight.
If there's suspicion, they can do so. But I'm talking of typical industrial concerns where you have GRA staff sitting there monitoring every product, every bottle that is produced. I mean, how would you maneuver? So when you have such a situation, then you have to ensure that everybody complies. And if everybody complies, there wouldn't be the need to be increasing the rate the way we are increasing it. So I think it's the enforcement and compliance that we also need to look at. And that's why I like the idea of introducing the VAT system. The challenge, though, is that how many of our people are that ready for it? We need to educate people. We need to ensure that, indeed, the punishment for non-compliance is so heavy that you won't even attempt. When you do that and you level the playing field, then everybody can then support government in generating the revenue. Revenue generation is key. And at this stage, I don't think that anybody would deny government of it. Because if you don't, the economy will shut down. And we don't want that to happen. So as industries, as businesses, we are prepared to contribute. But let it be fair, let it be supportive, so that you don't cripple the very industries that you want to support to create the jobs for you.
How are industries doing as we speak right now?
As I said, these are challenging times. They know that.
How challenging? Are they still laying off? Are they still cutting down
laying
production?
Off and all that.
Cutting production.
You need to do a whole survey to do that. Sometimes we are careful in bringing out, making pronouncement of this without hard data. But generally speaking, one could say that there isn't really expansion going on. If anything, there's actually contraction, and it's manifesting in so many ways. Growth rate, government's own projections.
So the contraction. I mean, I still want to get in that they are not expanding.
They are not expanding.
If you are contracting, it means that obviously some people are going home as we speak.
Well, it is. I wouldn't make a category.
Not numbers, but
you see, what happens is that the way businesses manage their business, they always have different ways of handling issues. Sometimes you have workers who are casual labor, who probably work a number of hours in a day or in a week. Sometimes you can reduce it. So they are not going home, but then their income levels fall because you are trying to manage situations. You understand? And then there are also situations where you actually have to sack, and that happens occasionally. And there are also situations where you see the companies themselves shutting down. And you have to look at all these. And
is that happening?
A few are happening. A few are happening. But you see, for complete shutdown, most companies wouldn't like to do that because it's not that easy to resuscitate. So they try to manage, keep the business afloat.
You have three lines,
reduce one line, that kind of thing. And I remember recently what somebody was telling me was that, well, my workers, of course, work 5 days in a week, but because of the transport cost and the cost of their movement, they are demanding so much, and I cannot pay all that. So instead of working 5 days in a week, I make them work 3 days in a week. But when you come, you spend a bit more hours. Okay.
And that is what is happening for some of your members,
yes, so
scaling down the number of days they can work,
yes,
to cut down their cost of taking care of them for the full 5 working days.
Exactly, because it's an additional cost. The workers are burdened, and they expect that you, the employer, should increase their salaries to be able to maintain the same level of living. And you, the employer, you are also not making that much volume of sales. So what do? You have to manage it somehow. So different companies have different approaches, you know. But generally speaking, when you put it together, the net effect is that we are actually not expanding. At worst, we are virtually stable or we are contracting. And that's a very delicate matter, because if you look at, for an economy like Ghana, we should be growing and we should be expanding at all times, because the volume of students we are turning out from our universities and all that, you shouldn't have a negative growth or even 2% growth. You should be thinking of 7% and all that. But if you look at the situation now, even government itself, you look at the projection for next year, they are talking about 2.8% or so. So it means that there's actually a contraction going on. And it's
I'm already talking about a recession already.
And the government is an aggregation of everything together. Yeah. So if at the micro level, people are struggling, it will manifest at the macro level. So that's exactly what is happening.
Let me come to we've spent so much time on VAT, but can you just run us through the other tax measures in the budget that you think is of serious should or be of concern to me if I'm a business person?
All right. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the introduction or the replacement of the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy with a Growth and Sustainability Levy. So currently there are a couple of entities that pay 5% of their profit before tax in addition to the corporate income tax that are paid. Government is saying that going into 2023, I would expand that to cover all entities. So not only those parts, but all the others. For those who are currently paying the 5% profit before tax, government is also going to add companies in 6 sectors so that they also pay 5% before tax. We call that the Category A band. Then there's a Category B band. That Category B band is for everybody apart from the extractive sector. They would pay 2.5% of the profit before tax also as a kind of growth and sustainability levy. Then the third category are those in the extractives who will pay 1% of their production to the state as growth and sustainability levy. So businesses should begin to plan for this, that you are going to pay extra income tax to the state, but we'll call that growth and sustainability levy. That's the first thing. The other thing I would also want to share is the whole idea around minimum chargeable income. So George, I do business, I may make a loss. If you have the concept of minimum chargeable income, we have in our mind what you expect to make as the minimum profit that we should tax. And there will be a criteria for that. So you may make a loss and still pay taxes going into next year. So let's take note of that when the minimum chargeable income is brought in place. For those that import things into Ghana, George, have you wondered why you can go to China and bring things into Ghana, and the person you are dealing with in China knows the kind of product even without speaking English? there is a book we call the Harmonized Code, which basically gives product codes to products. So that if I need to buy something from China, all that I need to tell the person is, give me products with this particular code, and they give it to me. Now, because industry keeps changing the things that are being produced, so years ago we may not have had a pen drive. We may only have a CD drive. Now we have a pen drive and we need a code for it. So because products keep changing, the harmonized code is typically updated every 5 years. When they are updated, the harmonized code has in it some assigned tariffs, loosely said, some assigned custom duties. So with respect to the revision of the harmonized code, you may also have your tariffs being adjusted depending on where your product is now going to fall. So businesses should also monitor and ensure that as soon as we approve the new harmonized code to use, probably from next year, they know where their products actually fall. The other thing that I will add is regarding people who pay income taxes. So you heard about the 35% band that is coming up. We do not know yet at what level that would come in. But essentially, if you earn income that exceeds that particular band, it means you would pay any additional income at the rate of 35%. So it is something that we need also to prepare for. And maybe the last thing I'm going to talk about, or the last two things I'm going to talk about, George, is the issue around the exemptions bill, which was passed into act somewhere this year. The exemptions bill being passed into an act does not mean that government is no longer going to grant exemptions. That's not the meaning.
Wow,
But
interesting.
now what it means is that we have a properly defined procedure for granting exemptions. So if I want to get an exemption now, it is not about who I necessarily know, but I know that I need to go to Ministry A. Ministry A needs to go and convince the finance minister. Finance minister has to go and convince cabinet. Cabinet has to go and convince parliament. So when we start applying this, I hope that parliamentarians will no longer say that we are giving too much exemptions. Because how did you do it without getting the approval? Those in cabinet cannot shield themselves any longer because they are going to be part of the process. One last thing which I think, George, I watched you discuss with one of the ministers that I don't remember, is this whole issue around the Independent Tax Appeals Board. Even though it wasn't mentioned in this budget, George, I was sad it wasn't mentioned. And the reason is simple. Imani did a study and talked about something called fiscal recklessness and attributed it to the fact that there is so much revenue lying on the table and the Ministry of Finance is not getting those revenue. Sometimes, George, it's not like that. It is the case that an audit may have been done, a report may have been issued, but the GRA and the taxpayer are still heckling over that report. 2 years ago, in October, Parliament, in its own wisdom, said that to resolve issues between taxpayers and the GRA, and the fact that we always deal with the GRA, let us have a board. And George, let me give you the composition of the board. And I just cannot understand why 2 years down the line, the Ministry of Finance has still not brought this board into place. The composition of the board is made up of an 11-member team. The chairman of the board should be a lawyer with at least 10 years tax practice knowledge or a retired Supreme Court judge. That's the chairman. The board should have 2 tax consultants or a couple of tax consultants, accountants, and women also on the board. The chairman, 2 lawyers should have the same qualification as the chairman on the board. The Institute of Chartered Accountants Ghana and the Tax Institute are all required to nominate 2 persons onto the board, 2 retired GRA officials who were at least of management level, or what you call chief revenue officers, would also be in the board, and 2 women. George, this board sits, or is expected to sit in panels of 3, just as we have here. So that when I have an issue with the GRA, I don't just go to court. I go with GRA to the board, they listen to me, and they rule their case. So I hope that government going into 2023, after this law have been passed for over 2 years, would now help us resolve issues faster by instituting this board.
Let me come to Magbidu Abajan before I come to my guest in studio. Do you also think that, again, the uncertainties, today, and one example that, and government says that in this month they will launch this whole, whether it's a debt exchange program, a debt restructuring, and all the rest. Some have projected that's a clear present danger for us going forward. The uncertainties, it's not, and I was speaking to a businessman yesterday, it's like, George, I cannot plan. Is the uncertainties helping or not helping or making even things complicated for you and your members?
Yes, I mean, uncertainties for me for businesses is not good at all. That is why we've been complaining where the environment creates that uncertainties, and you can't really plan ahead for the years and what you are going to do. Every business requires that there's some level of certainty within that environment, that you can factor in all these things into your activities in the years ahead. For instance, when they are also doing their budget. In fact, for 2023, I would advise that they should be conservative when they are putting in all these government targets as an assumptions in their budget in the 2023, because I'm not too sure whether we'll be able to achieve all these targets that they have set for ourselves. So uncertainties for businesses is not good. And for me, if we are talking about haircut and other things, it creates further uncertainties and people are a bit apprehensive about what is going to happen. In fact, if you look at the budget deficit, the 61.4 billion, clearly all is going to be a source from domestic market. Now you are saying that I've already invested in government bonds and you are going to give me a haircut. In one breath, we are also saying that in 2023, your deficit, you are going to finance it through me. That I have money with you and you are not giving it to me. You expect that I give additional funding to you to finance your budget deficit because you cannot go into the international market. So, I mean, one will sit down and say, so what is going on? Should I even give my money to government? If there is another option for me to invest in, I would prefer that option than to give that money to government. And then the next few days, they'll come and tell me that you are not getting your interest for a number of years, or your principal is going to be reduced, or for one reason or the other. So we should be clear in what is happening when it comes to this debt structuring and haircut and all those issues. Let's consult and make it clear to those who have some money with the government that this is what we are going to do, ABCD. When you leave room, you create the opportunity for people to speculate, and that will not also help businesses, because people would say whatever they want to say, and others will pick it up, and they will decide to do whatever they want to do with it, and the information will also fit into the market, and that will not also augur well for businesses. So whatever we have to do to ensure that there is some level of certainty within the environment, we have to do that, and that will require that all the necessary information are given out, and those that have been consulted are also consulted, so that we all come into a level playing field on what we are going to do going forward.
Mr. Abajan, I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap up in your final words. 30 seconds.
For 30 seconds, I would say that they should listen to what we are saying. The VAT, the 2.5, is counterproductive. There's no doubt about that. But as businesses, we are also going to help whatever way to ensure that we contribute our quota in helping government to come out of the challenges. So the taxes that we have to pay, we will pay. But the ones that are inimical to businesses, and as businesses want to make profit, one way or the other, we'll find a way around it. So they should listen to us, come to the table, let's discuss, and move the country forward. Thank you.
So very good, John Kwanzaa. A minute if I get you to wrap up as you try to do the curtain down the show.
All right, thank you very much, George. So for me, I will end by saying three things. One, let's reform the VAT, because it is not even in line with the earmark funds capping and realignment act, which was passed in 2017, and I'm sure the advisors of government know why I'm saying that it is not in line with that act. Two, we host the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, and hence the whole idea of taking away the benchmark discount policy is good, it shows that we are getting closer to complying with our custom laws, which is what we should be doing. And then lastly, we would make an appeal to governments to lead by example. Laws that are passed by the parliamentarians that we all stand in the sun to vote for should be respected. 2 years is too long not to set up the Independent Tax Appeals Board. Government revenue are being delayed just because there are a lot of disputes between taxpayers and the GRA, because we do not think that we should just go to court to resolve issues that could have been resolved administratively or quasi-administratively by the board. So those are the three things I would like to end with.
I'll let you have the final words. Here.
No, thank you very much. I think I would just also support Abiku's appeal that the Independent Tax Appeal Board is very important. Let's set it up to support the situation. He talked about exemptions, and also let me add my voice that people have wrong perception about exemption.
Yeah.
We have demonized it so much that we think that everything about exemption is so bad. But it's not necessarily so. Yeah. If I'm bringing machines to come and produce and sell, the machines I'm bringing is not for sale. Why should I pay duties on the machines that I'm bringing? And some of them cost millions of dollars to do so. So if the process, you have to go through a process and get exemption on that, there's absolutely nothing wrong. So sometimes I think we have to tone down the exemption. It's the abuse of it that is a problem. And that's what we should all avoid. So the exemption does not mean that the exemption bill or law that we have now passed, if you go strictly by it, it will help a great deal. Because countries use it as a strategic tool to bring investors into their country. And so it's very important. I think that in the budget, government talked about boosting production. And in doing so, they mentioned a couple of things. One of them that I really want to emphasize is the government procurement. The fact that government procurement of various goods is going to also reduced by about 50%, I think is a laudable thing, because we think that government is the single largest buyer of all goods and services. So if we support that, government procurement alone can really boost in the production sector. And I'll give you one quick example so that we end this. I know your time is an issue. When it comes to printing, a lot of the books and the materials we are using in this country, we are bringing from outside. Government institutions are going out there and printing. All because we're going by a certain Florence Convention, about 1958 convention, that says that when you bring textbooks into your country, you shouldn't pay duty to promote education. Those times we didn't have sophisticated printing firms. Today we have all of this. So why do we continue with this kind of policies when we have local capacity to do so? So government printing and all the other inputs should be sourced locally, and I'm sure it will help a great deal. Thank you very much.
Sourcing it locally, it's Chuma Kwabwa, Chief Executive of the Association of Ghana Industries, Magbedua Baji, Chief Executive of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industries, and Abeku Jan Kwansa, he's a partner, Pricewaterhouse PwC Ghana. Thank you, my guest, for joining me to have a discussion on assessing the budget and its impact on business. I know the debate will go on in your homes and offices. And happy Farmers Day ahead to our farmers tomorrow as we look forward to having a great day. My name is George Wiafe. Have a great day.